Well, there were a lot of memorable moments in those first days and weeks here in Lithuania. I was leading a multinational Belgian-Danish detachment as a major at the time, so still at a fairly junior rank. But still I was getting phone calls from presidents and ministers and secretary generals on an almost daily basis. And they all wanted to know how they could help us bringing Baltic air policing, air policing to the Baltic states. So I was essentially given a free hand just to make it work, with all the political and military support that one could wish for, and that's of course something that rarely happens when you work in the military. But the most memorable moment for me personally must have been 2 days prior to the arrival of our jets. It must have been on the 26th of March 2004. While I was standing on that runway over there, at the time still a very long and very wide runway, together with my flight safety officer, just the two of us, and we had to decide that day whether Cholet would be safe enough to operate F-16s from. This airfield was not ready to be an air base yet. I mean, and we were only given very few days to actually transform it into something that approached a military air base, because we arrived here 1 week before the formal accession, and so we had 1 week to make things happen. The infrastructure was in a pretty bad shape. There was no surface to park the jets on, no shelters, no security, no connectivity, no lodging, no food, unreliable power supply. So a lot of things were missing. It was really a long list. It was really a bare base in its truest sense of the word. Fortunately, we were not the only ones here. It's often forgotten, but it was not only Belgium that sent a detachment. Actually, the Danes sent a quite sizable detachment as well. And it was actually Danes that brought in most of the heavy equipment that we needed for combat jet operations, like firefighting trucks, fuel trucks, runway sweeping equipment, cranes, things like that. Meanwhile, the Norwegian Air Force was installing radio relay stations throughout the Baltic states. So a lot of people, of course, were busy with it, but the main reason that we were able to pull it off in time, just in time, was of course because of the incredible support we received from the host nation, Lithuania. We just need to ask for something to be done, and they would do it. Not like in a couple of days or weeks, but they would start to do it right away at whatever cost. And so thanks to that mentality, that attitude, we were able to basically transform this airfield into an airbase in just a matter of days. But it was of course a lot of hard work for everybody involved. So everybody here was doing 14-hour shifts for several weeks straight. That brings me to another challenge, and that's one that we had not seen coming, a very different one. Back in those days in 2004, a certain part of the press in the Baltic states, also here in Lithuania, was still pushing the Russian agenda, and of course those people were not happy with our NATO presence here. We had a Lithuanian public affairs liaison officer, and a few days after our arrival he drew our attention to some local newspaper articles stating that Belgian soldiers were seen roaming around totally drunk in the streets of Cholet at night, harassing women and getting involved into bar fights and things like that. Actually didn't pay too much attention to them because we knew they weren't true, because we hardly had time to sleep, let alone go out at night. So we just laughed it off until such time that some very respected Belgian news outlets just copied those Lithuanian press articles, and then it was all of a sudden not funny anymore, because we started getting a lot of inquiries from the Belgian staff. People got phone calls from their spouses back home asking what was going on. So we actually spent a couple of days to actually convince people back home that this was all fake news. These days, the 3 Baltic states are now fully integrated into NATO's integrated air and missile defense posture. The 3 Baltic states are now producing their part of the recognized air picture themselves. It's very different these days, because these days the only thing that the other nations are still bringing in are the fighter jets. And of course everybody always looks at these jets because it's the most visible part of air policing, but it's not the most important part. The most important part is the command and control architecture, and that one is now firmly embedded within the 3 Baltic militaries, and I think that's a significant achievement. So we'll have to ask ourselves whether the current situation can be adequately handled with those peacetime rules. And if nothing else, I think we'll have to reinforce Baltic air policing so that it can more rapidly transform into an air defense capability alongside fully integrated ground-based air defense systems.